What's going on, everybody? Special guest here. Back again. Steve Wiseman covers Duke for the Raleigh News and Observer. Steve, how are you? I'm really excited to get going into this game, but how are you doing here?
Yeah, good. It's we're getting into the grind of the season here. It's time for ACC is starting to kind of sort itself out a little bit, right? We're 7 or 8 games into it for everybody as far as conference play, and starting to see who's emerging.
Yeah, and Coach Jim Larinaga recently, he always says this, but look, ACC is a marathon. You know, it's a 20-game schedule. As you mentioned, 7, 8 games. We're not even at the halfway point, but as you can see with teams at the top or teams like Duke right there in the middle, looking to move forward with what they've done. Duke 13-5, 4-3 in the conference. A couple things interesting that stand out to me. We'll certainly get into Miami Duke square off at noon on ESPN. I know Miami fans haven't always gotten a chance to see their team play, but everybody should be watching this game. Miami, exciting brand of basketball. They've had success thus far, 15-3, 6-2 in conference. They've played well at Duke. Duke, the 5 losses, 9-0 still at home. You know, there are positives with this team, but a week off. Steve, let's get into this week off. What do you think it does for this team, and maybe move forward as you mentioned, kind of get to this middle point and as things are getting sorted in the conference?
Yeah, they really needed, and this is really the last chance to do it, to have a few days to work and practice when they weren't preparing for an opponent, because they haven't played since last Saturday at Clemson, so they didn't have a midweek game, and they need to work on their offense. They have failed to shoot 40% 4 games in a row now. And that's very unlike what we usually see from Duke basketball. Usually they're one of the more efficient offensive teams in the country year in and year out when you look at KenPom. But they're not this year. They're not a very good shooting team. They have to go inside out. They have 2 7-footers. So you think they'd be able to get it going there. But that's one thing I know that they had to work on this week in practice, maybe tighten up the defense a little bit, although the defense has been a strength, but it can always get better. We saw some failures in that late and lost at Clemson. And then also number one would be, Jeremy Roach. Can they get him back healthy? And that's still a question mark as we sit here getting ready for the game on Saturday with Miami. I would be surprised if he plays. I still think he's a few more, maybe a couple more weeks away, but we'll see. We'll see what if they decide to push him or not. But the time off did give him a chance to kind of, self-analyze themselves, which they really needed.
With everything Roach brings to the table, obviously a young team and his experience there at point, is it as simple offensively as getting him back in there, or are there other things still in play? And maybe talk about that position, what they're kind of doing there at that guard spot with Jeremy out.
Yeah, so Jeremy, had been kind of sharing time at the point, even when healthy, with Tyrese Proctor, the Australian guard who reclassified and came in a year early. Which tells you where they are. If that's one of your main ball handlers and he's supposed to be in high school, maybe that's not such a good thing. But I mean, that's kind of where they are, because they, Roach was the only starter back from last year's Final Four team. So, he's the only guy with experience. He's the only captain. They really miss his, steadying force on the court. I mean, that sounds like a cliche maybe and all that and intangible, but it's on this team. It's really true because nobody else has been in these situations like he has. So, there one thing is that Proctor, without Roach in there, we've seen a little bit more growth in his game. Maybe that's allowed him the freedom to do some things maybe he felt constricted by trying to, in deference to Jeremy Roach. Maybe that's a good thing that'll come from this. He's had a couple games where he scored 17 points. He still turns the ball over a little more than what you want, and that's a problem. That's a problem, them getting the offense going. He's at best when he kind of gets in the lane and can dish to one of those big guys down low if they play kind of a 2-man game with that. But sometimes they get in there and he'll lose control of the ball and get knocked away, and that's a problem. So that's kind of what they've been doing. Jalen Blakes has been getting some playing time, a sophomore who didn't play hardly at all last year, so you can't even count him as having the experience. He's kind of like a freshman. He's shown a little bit more off the bench. He's been able to give him some minutes to help spell Proctor with Roach out of there.
You touched on that 2-man game, and obviously the guard play will be big in this. From Miami's standpoint, it's got to be a situation where they've got to outplay the other guards. Isaiah Wong, Nigel Pack. Pack is starting to pick his play up from 3. He's not played at Duke before, but he has played a couple games in Lawrence there when he was at K-State. So we'll see if he can kind of turn the corner, kind of watch him through shooting drills. He's definitely looking to have a big game at Duke. And again, the Miami guards will be the big one there. But you touched on the 2-man game. I want you to talk about maybe with what we've seen with Derek Lively, but obviously with what Kyle brings to the table, Filipowski, just his consistency, what he's able to do, the big as an advantage for Miami. It's certainly Duke's going to try to get their big men involved in this one. Talk about both of those two players. Obviously, different seasons thus far.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really flipped from what we thought it would be, because coming into the year, Lively was going to be the lottery pick, the top 5 pick maybe in the draft, and Filipowski was, if he has a strong year, maybe he'll go to the NBA. And now here it is in January, and it's like Filipowski's going, and who knows what Lively's going to do, because he hasn't shown hardly anything. In fact, he's shown next to nothing on offense. He's been a very strong defensive player, block shots, moves his feet well. He can switch off and get lined up with the guard and stick with him that way. So he's a pretty good defender, but he just hasn't shown much on offense besides, rim running, like they can lob passes, that kind of thing. Majority of his field goals have been dunks. So we're still waiting for him to show some moves on offense, and maybe they unlock some things in practice this week, and we'll see it on Saturday. I keep waiting for that to happen, but it hasn't. So, that's where people ask me, like, what's Duke's ceiling? Where can they go? There's a lot of growth left, because if Lively shows that he's a lottery pick type player, that's a lot better on offense than what they got now, right? So if they could give him the ball in the paint and let him go to work, but he doesn't have any tools to go work with right now. So Filipowski is the guy. He shoots well from pretty well from the perimeter. He's got a 3-point shot. He can put the ball in the court and go to the basket. He rebounds well. They're an exceptional rebounding team, particularly offensive rebounding, and Filipowski plays a huge role in that.
It's going to be interesting. Miami head coach Jim Larinaga already stated that they plan on starting Jordan Miller on Filipowski to start off the game. It's going to be interesting because, Miami with their size, and they're going to go with that athletic 4 in Miller guarding Filipowski. Be interesting. You touched on Lively, and again, Duke fans are all like yourself, all kind of waiting for something to kind of break through, consistency with the production offensively. They've got some other guys, with Mitchell and Whitehead starting to show some signs. What have you seen with those guys? And again, Duke, you see the talent. You touched on Proctor, obviously a highly regarded guy. It definitely does feel the potential's there, but I'm sure everybody wants the potential to hurry up and get here before Duke kind of falls back. It stays in the middle of the pack, but those two in particular with Mitchell and Whitehead there.
Yeah, so Mitchell showed me more than what I thought he would this year, and he's proven to be a really good defensive player. Again, kind of like Lively, although he's a little not quite as tall, but and long. But he's 6'8". He can switch off and guard a guy on the perimeter. He made one of the key defensive plays in their win at Boston College a couple Saturdays ago. They wouldn't have won that game without a block shot he had, and his ability to stay with the guard when he got switched off on him late on a possession there. He's been a good rebounder. So he's kind of not a star player, but he gives you the things you need pretty much on a nightly basis. Whitehead is the guy with a super high ceiling still. And he's a guy that, again, preseason, he's a lottery pick. He's only going to be here 1 year. I still believe that's true. I think he'll go because he's shown enough now that he's gotten healthy after breaking his foot in the off season. And that set him back quite a bit. He's starting to, he's had a couple games where he can, hit that step back 3-pointer, those NBA moves that you see, he's got them. And now it's a matter of consistency with him, because he'll go, 17, 18 points, 15 points. And then he'll have a game like Clemson where he had 6, I think, and, didn't shoot very well at all. But he's a threat any night to go off, for 15, 20 points. And so that's a weapon you like to have. And he's somebody that definitely Miami is going to have to look at in their game plan.
Certainly. We're talking so much offensively with Duke, 41st right now, according to Ken Palm in the efficiency rankings, but 10th only in conference games. But defensively, 32nd right now. We're touching so much offensively. But what are you seeing defensively? Do you like this team where they're at defensively? Again, is it still more growth to be had here?
I do like them defensively, yes, for the most part. They had laps here and there. Teams are going to have that, but particularly at home. And that's where we're talking about this game on Saturday is going to be at Cameron, where they're undefeated. They can suffocate a team defensively. And that's what happened to Pitt in the game that was here a couple Wednesdays ago, where Pitt was up 12 points early in the second half. And if that's a road game, Duke's not going to win it. I've seen it this year. They can't come back. They don't have the offensive firepower to come back. But defensively at home, they just totally shut down Pitt. And they got stop after stop after stop. And eventually, the offense got going. They started getting points. They came back and won that game. They feed off the energy at Cameron that way. They can switch at all 5 positions. They have the rim protectors with Lively and Filipowski, and then Ryan Young, the veteran transfer from Northwestern. So that's an area where, again, I mentioned the rebounding. They're exceptionally offensive rebounding team and defensive rebounding. But defense would be like they're not quite elite, but they're really good. At home, they're really elite, I think, is what to put it there. So that would carry them a long way. That's a good thing for them to have.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, that Pitt game was certainly interesting. It didn't look good for Duke early on. Pitt making shots the way they were making shots, and yeah, like you mentioned, and I think that's going to be big in this one because Miami, they've had some games where they've either gotten ahead by a little bit or even been down. The last game, even last game against Syracuse, down 11 in the second half, came back and won. Once again, that's at home. They did the same thing to NC State earlier this year, down 16 second half, came back and won once again at home. But Miami's got veteran players. I touched on Pack as a guy that's not played at Duke, nor Chad Omeir's not played there. So it'll be a little bit different for these guys. Omeir, foul trouble, leads the conference in fouls right now, and coach is certainly on him. And Miami doesn't have a lot of depth at the post spot behind Omeir. It's certainly going to be a fascinating game. Steve, I appreciate you taking the time to discuss this game. Really looking forward to it. College basketball. Now the games are really going to start coming 2-3 times a week here. Conference play get going. But appreciate you taking the time and talk to you later.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's going to be a really important game on Saturday for both teams for sure. Thank you.